Welcome to the very first recording of 3 Inning Fan, the podcast. I am excited and nervous and delighted to have you all along with me, especially my followers from Twitter. You have been a great community to me, and you've been with me from the beginning. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my full name is Kelley Franco Troop, and my friends still call me Kelley Franco. I have a baseball media company. It's called 3 Inning Fan LLC, and I can be found on the socials at 3 Inning Fan. I'll hope you'll follow along. So what are we going to do on this podcast? My mission is to discuss baseball in a way that informs and entertains my listeners and hopefully provokes some good and constructive dialogue online. I was born a Yankee fan and I married a Mets fan. So occasionally things used to get dicey in our house, but I've come to root for both teams, which I didn't think it was possible, but the Mets kind of grew on me. So if you find I talk a lot about New York baseball, that's why. I've had my own podcast on another platform, and I've been a guest on many other podcasts, but this is the first one that's truly my own. So it's a challenge for me. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm pushing my boundaries here, and the whole thing is a little bit uncomfortable for me, but I perform best when I'm uncomfortable. The challenge here, honestly, is just as much the technology as it is the content. In fact, I'm wondering if this is even recording right now. Can anybody hear me? I hope you can. My awesome intern, Melissa, has assured me that this is being recorded. So, in exchange for me doing this thing, I hope that you will download, like, listen, subscribe, and join me along as I go on this ride. It's free. And if you're watching me on YouTube right now, you will see that my rug has not yet arrived. It's supposed to get here today. So instead, we are showcasing this beautiful stained concrete floor. It's gonna be in all the magazines next year. You're gonna love it. Maybe someday you'll tell your grandchildren, I knew Kelley Franco before she had a rug. Without further ado, let's talk some baseball. Oh, we had breaking news today, and how nice of it was the universe to send breaking news on this, the first morning of my own 3 Inning Fan podcast, because it just makes it even more of a white knuckle roller coaster than it already was. So the breaking news is this: the Brewers acquired right-handed pitcher Aaron Civale from the Rays in exchange for a high A infielder named Gregory Berrios. Civale is under team control for this year and another year after this, so he's more than a rental for the Brewers. That should be a Bee Gees song. More than a rental to me. He struggled with the Rays last year and this year, with his total ERA being 5.17, and he's been particularly susceptible to the long ball. Now, just a reminder on that, last year, the Rays acquired Civale from the Guardians for Kyle Manzardo. So the Rays this year, in making this trade and sending Civale to the Brewers, we gotta wonder, are they waving the flag on 2024? The white flag, that is, not the American flag, which we'll all wave tomorrow. The Rays are in 4th place in the AL East. They're 11 games back, and they're 3 out of the wild card, which doesn't sound terrible until we remember with the expanded playoffs that the entire universe is 3 games out of the wild card. The Brewers, on the other hand, are trying to bolster their rotation in getting Civale. Now, Civale isn't exactly Walter Johnson, but he is solid, and he could have been underperforming with the Rays, so we'll see where that goes. So that's our breaking news for today. What I'd like to discuss first is Edwin Diaz's sticky stuff suspension. It expires this Saturday, July 6th. I have some notes on the rules surrounding his suspension because this process is very interesting to me, especially as an attorney, because in a way, it's almost like a legal process that takes place on the field. So I wanted to discuss it and some insights I have on it. So I have 3 points I'd like to make about the process surrounding this suspension. The first one is that MLB needs a uniform test that can be done on the field at the time the issue is presented. It would benefit the pitchers who would know the rules and be able to abide by it. And heck, they could even test themselves before they go out on the field if they're using a legal substance like rosin, because remember, even excess rosin can be against the rules. So even if it's a legal substance, if you use too much of it, it can be against the rules. So the pitchers would be able to abide by it more easily. And honestly, it would be easier for the umpires too, because they wouldn't have to rely on the old, "it was the stickiest hand I ever felt" argument. I mean, they don't want to get blowback for their decisions. They don't want to have to write it up the next day. They just want to have an easy test they can use. And so I don't think it's right that we have a system where conceivably one umpiring crew one day could find a sticky substance violation, yet another umpire crew on the very same hand could conceivably not find a sticky substance. Say that 10 times fast. Sticky substance violation. So the field test should be developed in a way that it preserves the evidence in case the pitcher wants to appeal the finding. Right now, it seems to me that they save the glove. You always see them carrying the glove off the field. They save the glove, but there's no way to document what was on the hand. It is, as we say in the legal field, spoliation of evidence. There's your first legal term of the day. So spoliation of evidence is when you fail to preserve the evidence. A good test would have an accurate reading of what was on the pitcher's hand. And yes, it also has to be a quick test because none of us want to wait any longer. It sounds like I'm asking a lot, but really this is entirely doable. So I told you that you would hear my legal side coming out, and you've already heard about spoliation of evidence. But let me give you some more. The current system for testing for sticky stuff is what we would call arbitrary and capricious. That's a legal world term for not good. Arbitrary and capricious means that a decision has not been hinged to any reasonable, logical set of steps. For example, if a case is appealed, an appellate court may overturn a lower court if it finds the lower court's decision was arbitrary and capricious, didn't adhere to a reasonable basis or to a rational legal standard. So right now, I would say Major League Baseball has an arbitrary and capricious problem with their sticky stuff testing. So pitchers and umps need to know the standard, and they need to have a clear way to test for it. My second point on this process, Diaz's suspension was for 10 games. This rule disproportionately affects relievers over starters. Starters would miss 2 games if they were suspended for 10 games, but a reliever is gonna miss multiple appearances. So I think it's a disproportionate effect. But as one of my ex-followers said, that's why you don't break the rules. And my third point about the process here, since Edwin Diaz was checked at the beginning of the inning and didn't throw a pitch, that should count as the first game of the suspension. If he had pitched an inning and then been checked and then thrown out, he would then serve 10 games. But since he didn't pitch an inning because he was thrown out and then was sentenced to 10 games of a suspension, he's essentially serving an 11-game suspension. This is an inconsistency that should be remedied. Okay, enough about the rules. What about Edwin Diaz and his dirty hand? Well, You're listening to me to get an opinion and not to be wishy-washy. So let's get to this. My guess, and it's a guess, because Edwin didn't tell me anything, and Edwin has not been placed before a jury of his peers. But my guess is that Diaz was pushing the boundary of this sticky stuff and was in violation of this, albeit subjective, rule. Here's the basis for my guess. Number one, his hand had a whole lot of something on it. Yes, we all heard David Cohn say that rosin could leave that kind of substance on a hand, okay? But remember that even an excess amount of sticky stuff, legal sticky stuff like rosin, is against the rules. Yes, of course, looks can be deceiving. I know that. But just like when I come home at the end of the day from the stores and I have 3 shopping bags in my hand, it's totally possible there is only one item of clothing in each one of those bags, and that each one of those items of clothing was on sale. But that's probably not what actually happened. Things are generally what they appear to be. Second point, why I think Diaz was violating the subjective sticky stuff rule. Mendoza did not publicly defend him, either in front of the umpires or in the post-game show. My guess is that he and Diaz have had a discussion about this issue before. Third point, my editorial here. Diaz missed all of last season. When he returned this season, he wasn't the same at the beginning of the season. He blew a bunch of saves, and then he spent some time on the IL. I think when he returned, it's conceivable that he might have thought he needed some help. He might have wanted to better control the ball, and I can't blame him. And you know who else might not blame him? A batter who has to face Edwin Diaz and might very much want Edwin Diaz to be able to control the ball. But still, he's got to play within the rules. So the Mets have some bullpen issues to deal with. It'll be better once Diaz is back this Saturday, but they're going to need some bullpen help if they decide to be buyers at the trade deadline. The state of the bullpen is a little bit weak right now. We've got Drew Smith's injury on top of it all. But I have to say, in defense of the Met bullpen, they have been heavily used this season. The starters need to go a bit deeper. Okay, I want to cover some Yankees, and then we're going to get out of the New York bubble. For the Yankees, I want to talk about their pitching because we've got some issues here. First of all, on the bright side, Cole had a nice outing. In his last outing, he had a great outing against the Jays. That was Sunday. He had had a very lukewarm prior start, given up a bunch of home runs. The concern was that Cole was still injured or that maybe he was rushed back, but hopefully not. Hopefully those first couple of starts were just kind of like his spring training, getting back in the groove, and he will hopefully continue on the right track there. But I have to say, if Marilyn McCoo had the wedding bell blues, that's a joke for my followers who are over the age of 119. If Marilyn McCoo had the wedding bell blues, the Yankees have the pitching staff blues, at least in June. Aside from Cole, we've got issues. They turn mostly on Rodon and Luis Gil, Carlos Rodon and Luis Gil. Chris Kirchner of The Athletic wrote a piece about Rodon and Gil on July 1st, and I hope you'll take a look at that. Chris does good work on The Athletic, and he's been a source for me here on this issue. Rodon has allowed 20 earned runs in the last 3 outings. That's hurtful. He also had a hurtful outing against the Blue Jays last Thursday, in which he gave up 8 earned runs on 10 hits in 5 innings. But I have to say, I give him credit because he gave up those 8 runs in the first 2 innings. And you know what he did? He stayed in for 5 innings and he cleaned up his mess. He kept the bullpen from being taxed even further. A lot of guys would have asked out of the game after that, but he didn't. So hats off on that. So How does he get better? How does Rodon get better? According to Chris Kirschner's piece, pitching coach Matt Blake believes that teams are adjusting to his fastball, so he needs to mix in more off speed and work on varying his location. He'll be pitching tonight against the Reds, and hopefully it goes better than Luis Gil did last night against the Reds. Luis Gil. A few weeks ago, we were all talking about him as possible All-Star Game starter, you name it, Cy Young winner. So what happened? He's had 3 bad starts in a row. He's showing control issues with walks and hitting batters with pitches. He's in his first season after Tommy John, and according to Kirschner in his piece, Gil is pushing up against, he's about 10 innings shy of the largest workload ever he's had professionally. So maybe he's got some fatigue. Perhaps that's the issue. He pitched last night against the Reds and he lost. He's lost 3 starts in a row, and the Yankees have lost 12 of their last 17. It's a bad patch, and they need to fight their way out of it. The Yankees pitching staff has fallen off, okay? And when you're in the middle of the funk, it seems like the funk's never going to end. Hopefully it does. The Yankee pitching staff allowed 3.12 runs per game in May. That was the best in MLB. And 5.59 runs per game in June. That was 29th in MLB. The only team worse was the Rockies. So the Yankees need to snap out of their starting pitching funk. They're also probably going to need some bullpen pitching at the trade deadline, like the Mets. So I think that the trade deadline market will be a seller's market for bullpen pitchers. And I think that the star of that will be Mason Miller if he gets moved by the A's. All right, let's get out of the New York bubble and talk about teams that are interesting to me right now. Like the Mets of late, the Astros have been on fire. And also just like the Mets, just a month ago, the Astros were on life support. The Astros were 8 games under 500 at the end of May, and then they went 17-8 in June, the best June in Major League Baseball. The Astros did lose last night, though, so now they're 3 games out of the AL West behind the Mariners. The Astros not only have a pulse, they have a surging pulse. And why? Well, a few reasons. But the first reason that comes to my mind is pitcher Hunter Brown. We saw him in a strong outing on Monday against the Blue Jays, giving up only 2 hits, 3 walks, and no earned runs over 6 innings. But it's not just one good start. Hunter Brown has put together a series of good starts. The 25-year-old right-hander has had 8 consecutive quality starts. He has a .29 ERA over his past 5 starts. In contrast, he struggled earlier in the season with an 8.89 ERA through his first 7 starts. The big question for the Astros rotation is, when will they get Verlander back? The reports have been discouraging, with manager Joe Espada saying he's been progressing slowly and is dealing with neck soreness. He started 10 games for the Astros this season, compiling a 3-2 record with a 3.95 ERA, which is not awful, but it's just not very Verlander-y. There's no firm date for his return, so I'm sure they're ready to see him back, as well as right-handed starter Luis Garcia, who's rehabbing from Tommy John, and the Astros hope to have him back by the end of July. A few weeks ago, some people wondered if the Astros could have been sellers at the trade deadline, but now that is not looking like the case. If they continue their hot play, I think they will likely look to acquire some starting pitching at the trade deadline, just like the entire rest of the world. So there are those Astros, reminding us that they're still the Astros. Right now, If we had sponsors, we would stop and break for sponsors, but we don't have any sponsors. It's only our first podcast. Maybe someday we will. Tell me, what are these things you call sponsors? Okay, also interesting to me right now are the Nationals. Yeah, I know they're not, in first place or anything like that, but they're a team to watch, and they're a young team to watch, and I love young teams to watch. I've enjoyed seeing them play this week against the Mets. Let me give you a quick overview of the Nationals in case you're kind of like me and you don't get to watch them every night. They lost 107 games in 2022. In 2023, they went 71-91. They finished 2023 in last place in the NL East. But last year, they did show some flashes of strength toward the end of the season. They had a 17-11 August. So we kind of saw some glimpses there. The most high profile move by GM Mike Rizzo in the recent past was trading Juan Soto in 2022 to the Padres. The Nats traded Soto and first baseman Josh Bell and got a world of prospects. They got shortstop CJ Abrams. He's the one we all hear about this year. They got left-handed pitcher Mackenzie Gore, outfielder Robert Hassel III, outfielder James Wood, gonna talk more about him in a second, right-hander Harlan Susana, and our old New York friend, DH and first baseman Luke Voigt was also in that trade. So now, when you trade for prospects, as you know, you get what you get, and sometimes you get upset because you never know how they're gonna perform in the major leagues. But now Mike Rizzo is looking pretty good. So let's talk about the Nats Monday night game against the Mets because it was a little bit special. On the mound, you had Mackenzie Gore, who they got in that trade. CJ Abrams, who they got in that trade, was at shortstop. And James Wood, who they also got in that trade, was out there in left field, 21 years old, 6'7", 234 pounds, and he made his major league debut on Monday night. And it was a sight to see, I have to say. So 3 of those guys they got for Juan Soto were all showcased. Abrams is having a strong year, hitting .284 with a .860 OPS, and he had a hit and 2 walks and scored twice in that game. Wood got his first major league hit. It was really special to watch. He played left field, and as far as I could see, he had a million of his, friends and family there to see him. And that, that's the kind of baseball that we're all here for. Mackenzie Gore had a solid outing. He went 5 2/3. He gave up 1 run on 5 hits and currently has a 3.47 ERA. So one has to wonder if this trio, Gore, Abrams, Wood, is the pillar of future growth for the Nationals. The Nats haven't had a winning season since 2019, although what a season that was, and it's unsure if they're going to have a winning season this year. But if these young stars play and stay healthy, you have to wonder if a new dawn is coming. Oh, I just got an email that my rug arrived. Okay, Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. We're going to talk about these guys because we're almost at the All-Star break, and probably to you, spring training seems like it was really far away. But guess what? To Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell, spring training was very, very far away because the last spring training they had was spring training 2023. And after looking at their performances so far this year, we have to conclude that spring training matters. So let me refresh your recollection on the off-season sagas of these 2 Scott Boras clients, Snell and Montgomery. They both languished, unsigned, in the off-season. They both eventually signed, but missed spring training with their new teams. So when we wonder if spring training matters, an high school teacher told me once, you can't have proof by example, which might be true, but these are two pretty good examples that spring training does matter. Snell wasn't signed all winter, and then finally in mid-March, he signed a 2-year deal with the Giants, which has an opt-out at the end of 2024. He missed spring training with the Giants. Last season, Snell had a 14-9 record with a 2.25 ERA, 32 starts, 180 innings, and he won the NL Cy Young. Now, Blake Snell, the reigning 2023 NL Cy Young winner, is currently pitching at AAA Sacramento for the Giants. He's been set back by a groin injury this first half with 2 stints on the IL. In his 6 starts for the Giants this season, Snell was 0-3 with a 9.51 ERA. He hasn't finished 5 innings in any start, although in fairness, he wasn't exactly known for going deep into games in his past seasons either. But the Giants need him. Their starting rotation is in shambles. They have a kind of a Logan Webb, Jordan Hicks pray for rain situation, which is not good and doesn't even rhyme like Spawn saying pray for rain. So the Giants need him back, and Snell doesn't want to be rushed back. So they're at a standstill at the moment. Jordan Montgomery. I missed him when he left the Yankees. He was a nice lefty, young lefty who came up through the system. He went to the Cardinals in a 2022 trade, and then he went to the Rangers in 23, where he pitched great in the World Series last year. He was 3-1 with a 2.9 ERA in the postseason. Like Scott Boris's client Snell, Montgomery was not signed until just about opening day. He signed with the D-backs in March of 2024. And like Snell, he missed spring training with his team. So far this year, Monty is 6-5 with a 6.03 ERA over 65 innings pitched. He had a meltdown in the dugout last week after a particularly bad outing against the Twins, in which he didn't make it out of the 3rd inning. He threw his pitch comm against the wall, and then he picked up his pitch comm and he threw it against the wall again. He's slated to pitch tonight against the Dodgers. So I'm sure pitchers who are free agents at the end of this season are taking notes. That note says, do not miss spring training. Okay, we're wrapping up here. So what are we going to look forward to this week? The Mets are going to Pittsburgh starting on Friday. And although the pitching rotation doesn't seem to be set yet, I'm hoping we get to see Paul Skeens pitch. We have a special anniversary on July 5th. It is the 77th anniversary of Larry Doby breaking the color barrier in the American League with the then Cleveland Indians, just months after Jackie Robinson did the same with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And thanks to my follower, Fred Sternberg, for reminding me of this anniversary. And July 4th is, I think some people might remember this, the 41st anniversary of Yankee Dave Righetti's no-hitter against the Boston Red Sox. Okay, so when you watch my podcast, you are going to note that we have a nice closer for our podcast, and the closer is we discuss what we'd like to eat while watching a ball game. What are our favorite things to eat while we watch a ball game? And this could be while you're at the ballpark, or it could be while you're sitting there on your couch, shoving it in your mouth, because that's also fun too. And I like to talk about food because besides baseball, I like to eat food, I like to cook food, and I also like to grow food in my garden. So sometimes you'll see pictures of my garden online. So for this, my first 3-inning fan, the podcast, I am going to go old school on what I like to eat while watching a ball game. And I'm talking about the cheeseburger. And I don't mean the kind of cheeseburger that you get from fast food, although those certainly fit the bill at sometimes if you want them. But I'm talking the kind of cheeseburger that you make in your house that is delicious. And I have a particular way I make my cheeseburgers that make them delicious. So first of all, I use 80% beef. that ground beef that has 20% fat in it. Do not make your burgers with lean beef because they won't be juicy. So use that 80% beef and you will have a nice juicy burger. And although fancy cheeses certainly have their place in life, I love fancy cheeses. On a cheeseburger, I like white American cheese. Don't judge me. And I like it cut very thick. And I find that if I say to Mr. Deliman, would you please cut me white American cheese on number 3, that makes sense in their land, because that slicer they have that looks like it should take a limb off, that has a setting, number 3, and it's a very thick setting. So you say to Deliman, I'd like my slices of white American cheese cut on number 3, please. And they will be thick and delicious, and it will melt like a dream. Now, lastly, we have to talk about the bun and the bun size, because just like in life, bun size is important. I do not like when my burger bun is too big and it overwhelms the burger. So what I actually like to use are those super size Thomas's English muffins. Those are the perfect size bun for my cheeseburgers. And of course, you'll want a beverage when you enjoy your cheeseburger. And so here I have for you a historical note. And I don't know if you knew this, but no man has ever been injured when he was pouring a cocktail of tequila for his wife. Never in the history of the world has a man been injured while pouring tequila for his wife. It's a fact. So, friends, thank you so much for joining me on this very first edition of 3 Inning Fan, the podcast. I really appreciate it, and I hope you'll join me again next week. Bye-bye.